Hey there, folks, coming at you with this week's market wrap video and sector watch. So another impressive week for the bulls. I know there's a lot of pessimism out there in the marketplace, um, but the market continues to look favorable upon the bulls. We have not had any reason to think that there is a big sell-off coming. At least technically, we're doing what is happening right now is actually very constructive. We're consolidating in a very tight range, working off some overbought conditions, potentially looking to make a move higher. We'll see how it turns out. Could we, break down? Absolutely, we could. We had this little sell-off day here. What was that, on Wednesday? And, I could see people already feeling as though this is it, time to jump in, get short. And you just didn't have any confirmation to do so. We are consolidating earnings. I don't think we're as bad as some people had anticipated they would be. And the markets are holding up fairly well. So we'll see what happens next week. Anything is possible. Could we break down? Could something happen over the weekend that changes the dynamics of everything? Certainly. Could the Fed start, jawboning that they're going to raise the rate in September? Absolutely. Could that put some pressure on the markets? You bet. Could the dollar completely tank? Yes, it could. Could that bring down the markets? It could. We'll see what happens, right? We've just got to keep our minds open to the possibilities that exist. But for right now, very nice looking, tight consolidation, holding over the 8 EMA. Looks really good on the NASDAQ. Let's take a look at the IBB. The IBB, we've talked about over the last several weeks that the IBB looks as though it really wants to go up and test that $300 holla. We got really, really close. 299.52, I believe, is what it wound up tagging. And then we had a pull back. And listen, I don't think it was a real big deal that we had a pullback. I think actually that's very healthy, right? If you look to where we pulled back to this 286, 287 area, which acted as resistance previously. And now it's acting as support, and that's really what you want to see, right? What once was resistance now becomes support. We pulled back to it. We are so now we've got this little trend line that we're dealing with. We'll see if we can break back through this trend line, come back up, and really test that $300 roll with some conviction. But it was actually a very healthy pullback. What we don't want to see is that 286 close, a high volume break below that 286 and then close below there, right? I mean, we could always pierce it and then finish, wind up closing up above it at the end of the day. Maybe, scare some people out because that's where a lot of people are going to have their stops placed. That is possible, but this is, we want to see this 286 hold and stay above the 200-day moving average. So IBB looks very constructive, very healthy. IWM, same thing, nice consolidation. Nothing that would suggest that you should be going short right now. I think that would be actually a pretty dangerous trade, but we'll see. IWM looking good, consolidating at an area of potential price resistance, so that is to be expected. Let's take a look at transportation. So, some of the airlines definitely were under a bit of pressure this week. I think a lot of that had to do with Delta Airlines and their woes, but transportation actually held up fairly well. It had this big move. It wound up breaking up over this trend line here, this longer term trend line, right? Broke up over that, wound up breaking below, bouncing right off the 200-day moving average and now consolidating right on top of this trend line. So, we'll see what happens here. Want to see this trend line actually hold as support. I think that would be positive for the transportation sector. Labu had a little bounce today with the IBB. I've pointed this out for several weeks. If you don't want to trade any individual names in the IBB and you don't want to trade the IBB, Labu offers a good opportunity to be involved in the space. If you look at what Labu did, it basically pulled right back into this area that was resistance, now acting as support. Very healthy, looks very similar to the IBB. LABD, if we do break below that 286 with real volume, real conviction, if the markets completely roll over, then this LABD could present an opportunity. Let's take a look at what happened with gold. Actually, before we go to gold, let's take a look at the dollar. Oops. So the dollar did pull back a little bit, but actually managed to close at or near the high of the day. So gold and silver, let's just take a look at those real quick. Actually pulled back a little bit, right? And gold and silver do appear to be struggling a little bit. Now, if the Fed starts, jawboning that they're going to raise the rate in September, well, then maybe you see this trend continue, right? Because you see the dollar strengthen, and if the dollar strengthens, then you're going to see maybe gold and silver pull back. Let's take a look at gold. Which pulled back a little bit as well. So, we're starting to put in patterns of potentially lower highs and lower lows, right? We've got a lower high, and if we come down here and break below here, then we've got a lower low. So I would be somewhat more cautious with gold and the miners. I mean, they are flirting. The gold and the miners at least are flirting with their 52-week highs. Okay, they actually are holding up fairly well. GDX, GDXJ, actually holding up better than the underlying metal. Let's take a look at JNUG, right? Flirting with this 325, and it looks as though we closed pretty close to the low of the day. Let's take a look at Nugget. And Nugget looks like it closed pretty much close to the low of the day. So potentially getting tired. I would be careful in the space. If JNUG and Nugget do roll over, you can keep an eye on JDST and Dust. Right? If you really see some weakness in the miners, those two could be potential opportunities. Dust and JDust. Let's take a look at the SMH, which has been really impressive. Consolidating, near all-time highs. Very healthy action. There's still merger and acquisitions going on within the space. So it's really, I think you want to continue to look for opportunities in the semiconductor space. And the S&P 500. Nice little indecision candle. No, that's not really. And it's consolidating. S&P 500 still looks healthy. Let's go to some specific indexes. So, this week, retail was the big winner, right? I mean, we got some retail sales numbers out of some of the big chain stores, and they came in better than expected, which I think is a really good thing for the market. And, the ETF responded to that. We'll see if we can get some follow through or continuation. I mean, it is coming up into an area of potential price resistance, but we'll see if we can get a continuation of that move next week. Energy, even though oil was a bit weak earlier in the week, we wound up actually doing okay in energy and the energy sector and oil itself. Let's take a look and see what USO did. So we had a couple of days of a pullback, and now we've had a couple days moving up. And what's interesting about today is we had a pretty sizable rig count add, and it didn't really seem to impact the price of oil. So some interesting things going on, interesting dynamics. We've had some jawboning out of OPEC, and it seemed to have played a role in oil rebounding. But what is interesting, and if you read the blog this week, I did talk about the fact that, even with oil down, not breaking below $40 a barrel, it's still in this price range is still problematic for a lot of companies. And there is such a tremendous amount of debt out there that there are going to be some pretty big oil companies and oil-related stocks that are just going to disappear. And a good example of that is ORIG, O-R-I-G, who just reported yesterday and basically said they have hired legal counsel to explore potentially bankruptcy proceedings. And another one that did the same thing is TDW, right? TDW, which has been around, I think, since 1950 or something to that effect. And they may be looking at bankruptcy restructuring. So, still a lot of questions out there in the oil and gas industry. You need to be careful in the energy space. Make sure you know what you're playing, especially if you're holding them overnight for swings or investments. So let's take a look at what else we've got going on this week. So we did retail. Metals and mining pulling back a little bit, right? What we want to see is that it holds support somewhere around here, around 26.44. It's got a little ways to come down, though, just to test this dominant trend line. Consumer discretionary had a little pop. Some of that was off of, I believe, some restaurant earnings, but fairly decent move in consumer discretionary. Still looks very healthy. Healthcare, nice little controlled pullback after coming up into an area of potential price resistance. Okay, and we've got a really clearly defined area of potential support for healthcare down here at 70, roughly 73. So maybe we just continue to drift a little bit here, maybe come down and test this 73, see if that does act as strong support and get a bounce. Industrials still consolidating, looks very healthy. Financials actually finally broke over this longer term trend line here. Nice little pop over it, got a little bit out of the Bollinger Band, pulling back. Maybe we look to see if this trend line holds as support, but financials actually had a pretty interesting move this week. Energy, $69 basically seems to be like a pretty big spot for the XLE. If we can take out 69 with conviction, maybe get a pop up into the $72 range is actually what I'm thinking here. 71, 75, 72 bucks. We'll see. how this trend line acts next week. If this price resistance and this trend line act as resistance and we pull back, maybe come down and retest this trend line. Materials sector, a little pull today. Not huge volume on this pull though on the materials. Let's take a look at home builders. Home builders consolidating. Still looks pretty healthy to me. And let's see, I think that may be it. Aerospace and defense, you know, seems to be rock solid, holding up very nicely. You know, getting a little, I mean, it's holding up really nicely. I mean, it looks very, very good as well. So listen, just same thing last few weeks. Let's see where we go next week. If we can break out in either direction with some real conviction, as opposed to, you know, this continued choppy range. If we do get a real serious breakout, I think that could catch people off guard, man. There are a lot of big money people out there that are betting against this market. So be careful out there, but it does still look pretty darn bullish. I will be doing stocks to watch on Ticker TV Sunday at 8 a.m. If you like what you see here, join us over there on Ticker TV, Vegas Trader 66, and we'll go through some stocks to watch for next week. All right, enjoy the weekend. Be safe, have fun, and I'll either see you Sunday or I'll see you next week.